A child hesitates at the edge of a playground slide. The instinct is to rush, to protect, to stop any fall. Now imagine another child, allowed to climb, to stumble, to test his own balance. Who will truly learn about risk, problem-solving, and consequences? Jean Piaget, the great child psychologist, showed that children are not small adults. They think differently, building logic step by step through their own experiences, mistakes, and discoveries. Piaget noticed that when children are shielded from challenges, their ability to imagine, hypothesize, and innovate diminishes. A child left to invent games, construct imaginary worlds, or solve practical problems independently exercises the mind in ways that strict guidance cannot replicate. For example, a child building a simple bridge from wooden blocks does not merely learn balance or symmetry. The child experiments with weight, tension, and support. When the bridge collapses, the child tries again, testing new designs. Each attempt is a laboratory for logic, trial, and failure. Overprotection often interrupts this process, as adults intervene too quickly, instructing the correct way to build or warning that blocks might fall. What is lost is the fundamental experience of learning through exploration and the intrinsic joy of discovery. Language development is another area where overprotection can create invisible limitations. Piaget highlighted that children construct meaning from the world, not merely repeat words. When overprotected children are rarely allowed to express thoughts freely, or when adults correct them at every step, they may develop speech that is precise but lacks flexibility, nuance, and independent reasoning. In contrast, children allowed to make linguistic mistakes, argue over word meanings, or invent their own terms often develop sharper reasoning skills. They learn that words are tools to represent thought, not rigid rules imposed by authority. Overprotection also alters a child's understanding of consequences. Piaget emphasized that children learn to connect actions with outcomes through direct experience. A child who spills water learns not only about volume but about cause and effect, the slipperiness of the floor, the need for cleanup, and the implications of choice. When every misstep is prevented, children fail to internalize the link between action and result. Later, they may struggle with decision-making in complex situations. Adults who never experienced natural consequences in childhood often rely excessively on external guidance or avoid risk entirely. Consider Piaget's studies on moral development. In early childhood, rules are seen as absolute, and punishment is a central concern. But as children grow and interact freely, they begin to understand that rules can be flexible, negotiated, and applied with consideration for fairness. A child overprotected from small disputes or corrected at every moral choice may never engage deeply with questions of justice and fairness. The mind that never experiences conflict struggles to develop independent judgment, empathy, and ethical reasoning. Overprotection, in this sense, stunts not only the cognitive but the moral growth of children. Social reasoning is equally affected. Piaget observed that peer interactions teach children perspectives beyond their own. When a child must compromise, explain, and persuade, the mind learns to weigh alternatives and understand other viewpoints. Overprotected children, whose every interaction is guided or monitored, miss these opportunities. They may grow into adults who interpret the world in black and white, fail to understand nuance, and react emotionally rather than rationally in social situations. Emotional intelligence, too, suffers. Children who are overprotected often develop heightened fear responses, as their minds are conditioned to rely on external guidance for safety. Piaget's observations suggest that emotions like frustration, disappointment, and even guilt are not merely negative experiences. They are signals that stimulate reflection, problem-solving, and resilience. Overprotected children who never experience these feelings naturally may encounter them later in life in overwhelming ways. When challenges finally arise without supervision, they are unprepared to cope, leading to anxiety, indecision, or avoidance. Even practical skills are impacted. Everyday tasks like tying shoelaces, cooking, or solving small household problems require initiative and experimentation. Children allowed to try, fail, and persist develop confidence and autonomy. Piaget's logic implies that intelligence is not just memorization of facts, it is the capacity to interact with the world actively, to learn from outcomes, and to adjust strategies. Overprotection replaces active learning with passive observation, leaving gaps that formal education alone cannot fill. An illustration from Piaget's own studies involves children playing with blocks. In free play, children invent rules, test hypotheses, and explore symmetry, balance, and structure. Overprotected children, given instructions for every activity, merely replicate the adult's ideas. Their minds do not stretch, they do not explore, and they do not encounter the frustrations that spark ingenuity. Piaget emphasized that the mind learns best when it is challenged just enough. Not too little, not too much. Overprotection tilts this delicate balance, keeping children in a perpetual state of passive observation rather than active engagement. Piaget would present children with liquid in two identical glasses. When poured into a taller, thinner glass, many younger children assumed the taller glass contained more liquid. They observed with their senses, but had not yet developed the logic to conserve quantity mentally. Now, a child who is overprotected, constantly told the correct answer, may never experience the frustration and curiosity that drives the discovery of conservation. A child who is allowed to reason, allowed to make mistakes, eventually constructs a correct understanding on their own. This construction of knowledge is central to Piaget's philosophy. Learning is not transferred passively from adult to child. It is built actively through trials, errors, and exploration. Piaget also discussed the idea of constructivism, the principle that knowledge is built actively rather than passively received. A child must engage with objects, people, and situations to form mental representations and concepts. Overprotection limits this engagement. For instance, consider a child exploring nature, a garden, a forest, or even a simple patch of grass. Every insect examined, every leaf turned, every path followed is an experiment in observation, classification, and reasoning. An overprotected child, shuttled from indoors to supervised activities, misses countless chances to explore patterns, cause-effect relationships, and the natural logic of the world. The cumulative effect of overprotection is profound. Piaget's work makes it clear that cognitive, emotional, and social growth are intertwined. Shielding a child from minor risks and errors may feel safe in the short term, but in the long term, it creates dependence, fear, and reduced critical thinking. Children may grow into adults who hesitate to make choices, lack confidence in reasoning, struggle with abstract thought, and fear innovation. Their ability to navigate complex, unpredictable situations is compromised, as is their capacity for creativity and independent judgment. Piaget observed that when children are shielded too much from errors and challenges, their cognitive growth slows. He recounted countless examples where children, left to explore on their own, would construct fascinating problem-solving strategies, often inventing methods that adults would never anticipate. A classic example comes from his observation of children playing with water. When left to pour, spill, and experiment, a child begins to understand concepts like volume, displacement, and cause and effect without being taught formally. But a child constantly corrected, shielded from spillage, and told that water should not be wasted misses that opportunity to internalize these principles. Overprotection not only affects learning, but also the development of autonomy. Piaget highlighted stages of cognitive development, starting with the sensorimotor phase, moving to pre-operational thinking, concrete operational thinking, and eventually reaching formal operational thought. Each stage relies on experiences that are real, often messy, and frequently challenging. When a child is never allowed to fail, The sensorimotor phase becomes constrained. The pre-operational mind never tests the limits of its imagination against reality. And the concrete operational stage never learns how to manipulate tangible objects to form abstract understanding. In essence, the child's mind is trapped in an invisible cage. By embracing Piaget's insights, we can ensure that our desire to protect does not inadvertently cage the minds we cherish most. Every stumble, every experiment, every trial in childhood is a brick in the foundation of a future capable of reasoning, creativity, and moral insight. Overprotection may feel protective, but in truth, it diminishes the very qualities that make a mind thrive, shaping adults who know safety but not freedom, knowledge but not understanding, and caution but not courage.